All right. This I listened to yesterday, and I was so pleased with the caller.
Do you think that the definition of species is arbitrary?
Sean says, a reminder, you can become a member and pay your taxes automatically each month. That's true, Sean. Thank you for that.
Necessarily.
Okay, listen to this question.
Can I ask you one question really concisely? Do you think that the definition of species is arbitrary?
Necessarily so, yes. But it's also really important to remember that there is no single definition of species.
These people are just absolute nut jobs. It's amazing you can say that. You can utter that. You can actually say that. You can take this weird nominalist position and take it into a claim that requires it not be nominal, that requires it be an objective, established, real thing. They don't get it. They're like, no, it could be, we can argue for the objectivity of changing speciation and everything we're saying in between by observing species. By observing the thing that's not objective? Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with the biologist named...
I mean, he went the wrong way right there, dude. Like the caller, there's a philosophical argument against this position, but now he's going, are you familiar with this guy? He should have said, well, okay, if it's arbitrary, how do you objectively know speciation is occurring if it's not objective?
Ernest Mayr.
What's up? Thank you for that.
Yes.
Daniel?
So he has a non-arbitrary definition of species, which isn't exactly what the current definition of species is. I think it's much more important to look at his definition, which he defines it as species as a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring, effectively being reproductively isolated from other such groups. So it's a reproductively isolated group of organisms.
Right. So just to be clear, Ernst Mayr, that what you just described there is called the biological species concept, and that is the most frequently used definition of species. But like across all of biology, that is the number one most used species concept. But it's important to remember that it is still just the species concept, not actually a definition.
So let me get this straight, Forrest. Evolution actually happens, but the only thing you have is a concept for it. Not only that, but it's an arbitrary concept. So you're teaching people that this process occurs, which requires this distinction, species, and even in the most rigid definition of species, you're saying even that is merely conceptual. There's no actuality to species, right? It's just amazing. It's like we really are in idiocracy. It is crazy. And the problem is that these people don't do any philosophy. They think philosophy's silly and they just do science, and then they don't realize the entailments of their nominal positions. They don't understand. Everything else would be arbitrary. Why isn't everything else just arbitrary and conceptual then? Like alleles changing or DNA sequencing or anything. Phenotype, genotype, is that arbitrary? All taxonomy, they have to admit, is arbitrary. All change, totally arbitrary. Completely observed in a frame of time that ultimately doesn't give you access to the larger frame of time.
Because there is no such thing as species in a real sense.
Bro.
Of species. But like across all of biology, that is the number one most used species concept. But it's important to remember that it is still just the species concept, not actually a definition. Because there is no such thing as species in a real sense.
There's no such thing as species in a real sense. Premise 1, evolution assumes the changes of species over time. That's P. Not P. There's no such thing as species in a real sense. You fucking idiot.
The reason why it's just a concept is because it, like I said, it is necessarily an arbitrary categorization that we as biologists are giving this group of organisms that have certain unifying characteristics.
There's no such thing as evolution in a real sense. Exactly. How could you say there's no such thing as species in a real sense, but there's a real sense of evolution? What are you talking about, you dumbass?
There are other species concepts out there that are also functional in different circumstances. For example, if we're talking about dinosaurs, how are you going to tell?
Nope, there's no objective thing called a dinosaur, dude, according to your system.
Me which of these dinosaurs were reproductively isolated and which ones could interbreed with other ones?
No, you already lost, dude. The reference, the universal of dinosaurs doesn't exist. This is one of my key arguments against evolution. Is that the argument for evolution, when they point to the, quote, evidence, assumes these categories are real. And yet, in the same sentence, they'll deny the realness of the categories. So, sorry, Forrest, you dummy. You not only don't have access to the thing you're calling a change in species, but you don't even have the category dinosaurs, dude. Now, the caller isn't, he's doing fine, Kevin, whoever Kevin is, but he's not on point enough to say, wait, hold on a second. Isn't the term dinosaurs itself an arbitrary category that's not objective?
You can't, right? And so we have different fossil species concepts.
If they were alive today, it'd be pretty easy.
Based on the bones, as you can see by the bones, based on the bones, based on the bones.
Big old if, right?
Today, we can see that they're clearly different and distinctly separate, and there's no intermixing of the.
Corn Salt says, "Does anyone have an alternative theory? An alternative theory for what, dude?" Corn Salt, do you understand in science to have an alternative theory, you need a valid theory to begin with? You can't say an alternative theory. The only way to arbitrate between two competing hypotheses or theories is to have one of them be valid. Evolution isn't valid. So when you say, do you have a competing theory? A competing theory for what? Obviously, Corn Salt doesn't even know what a theory is.
There absolutely are. And that's the problem with the biological species concept, is that it is just one concept. If we're talking about fossil species, we have to have a different one. We have ecological species concepts where we define species by their place, their niches in an ecosystem. We have, my favorite is the Hanesian species concept, where you define species by their common ancestor. If they split.
Sorry, common ancestor. Dude, this is insane. So you define something by its common ancestor, which necessitates a previous species that's not it. This is how retarded evolution is. He's like, I really like the one definition of species in the arbitrary line of species definitions where one is not more true than the other. My favorite is the one that defines species as a subset of a previous ancestor. Dude, that requires an objective standard for the ancestor, dummy. What's the thing you're referring to that's an ancestor? Is that objective? This is insane. That's like saying, oh, the definition of species is that which comes forth from an ancestor or whatever. Well, the ancestor is also now a species that comes forth from an ancestor. You have to be stupid to believe in evolution when it's talked about this way.
From a common ancestor, and then that common ancestor dies. We now call it a different species. The issue is that
the issue is what I just said, is that everything you're calling an ancestor is itself needs to be a species that comes from a different species. No justification. Right, there's no realness to concepts from their view either, right?
Every single one of these concepts, including the biological species concept, which talks about reproductive isolation, not a single one of them works 100% of the time. Even if we're talking about reproductive isolation, there's still hybridization that happens all the fucking time between species.
Could I get an example of it not fitting?
Yeah, so like for example, three-toed box turtles here in where I come from, we see a clear distinction between ornate box turtles on one half of the state, simple three-toed box turtles looking plain and drab and gray on the other side, or brown on the other side of the state. They are definitely different species.
Yeah, they're not though, because you have no realness to the term species. You can't say they're definitely the same different species. You don't have a definition of species. You can't make the universal statement in biology to say these turtles are different species if you don't have a definition of species. Unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable.
And yet we get hybrids that are fertile all the fucking time.
Oh, you threw in a fuck. Wow, you're so edgy, Forrest.
And so like there's a lot of cases.
No. But you got to back up 10 steps. How do you know they're not subspecies?
It's because of the way that they're classified.
Oh, because we define them. What a moron you are, Forrest. You're such a moron, dude. What a douche. The combination of being a douche and a moron is not a good mix. That's a great question, Kevin. W's in the chat for Kevin. Yeah. He says they're different species. You go, well, what's the distinction? How do you know the difference between a different species or a subspecies? Well, we define it. So you don't know. How is defining your methodology? Can you imagine? This is what postmodernism brings us. Is when you ask for the methodology to distinguish one thing from the other, you simply say definition. For those of you who are on the fence about evolution, this is one of your leading advocates for it, Forrest Valkai. Listen to his answer again, just so you don't. If you didn't know how retarded it was, listen.
There's a lot of cases.
No, but you got to back up 10 steps. How do you know they're not subspecies?
It's because of the way that they're classified. As
How do you know that they're not subspecies? It's because of the way they're classified. Could they be classified as subspecies then? Arbitrarily?
As different species? Arbitrary? And like I said that a minute ago.
You said it a minute ago. That's a contradiction for us. You retard. Do you understand when the caller brings you into a contradiction? You just saying, yeah, I said the other thing that I contradicted just a minute ago. He's not even piecing it together that he's in a contradiction. You can't make the objective statement, this turtle and that turtle are objectively different species. If you just admitted that the term species is arbitrary, that means you can't actually know that they're the same species or a different species. Fucking idiot. These people are literal sophists. I asked Peterson a question in his debate with Jake to demonstrate it. He just read a script and didn't answer. It's almost like they're operating from a position where they just, I don't even know what it is. Like obviously, I believe it's a spiritual issue. But if it were just to be looked at from an intellectual issue, it's almost like their paradigm doesn't allow in, and this makes sense, like it's like a filter, like a colander for noodles. It doesn't let certain things through. They can't be processed because they're not even let through the filtering system. They're filtered out. If they're filtered in, it'll destroy the system. It's like an invader. It's like a thing that got into the manufacturing plant and messed and chewed up all the wires, basically. It throws off their epistemology. So they have a reaction. They're like, oh, you just have to ignore that. The thoughts that go through my head when these evolution proponents open their mouths are so dark, I wish I went to a grade school with them. Yeah, seriously, I have that same problem, H. Bronzy. I have so much wrath for these people. Like, that is my leading, sinful go-to. Seriously. I have so much wrath for them.
You already asked me that question, and I already said...
we're kind of having a disconnect here because I'm trying to talk about something non-arbitrary and you're trying to talk about something that are arbitrary and the classification. Someone already classified it, so that's your example. So that doesn't work.
No.
See, I wish Kevin here would just throw it back with P and not P instead of like, this is like a natural conversation with people prefer this, but just to be rigorous, you just got to get them on this. You got to say, okay, if it's not objective, to a species is not objective, then how could you say it's objectively the case that this turtle and that turtle are different species? It's simple. It's an epistemic question. How do you know X is the case if your standard for X being the case is arbitrary? It's a fair question to ask directly. H. Browsy, another $5. I disagree with Snagglebees. These people in particular don't seem to be sophists to me. They're simply not all there in their head. I mean, it's hard. Yeah, it is kind of hard to distinguish between sophists. To be fair, if you're a known sophist, at least from the school of thought, you're just okay using fallacies. Like, you're aware of using fallacies. So H. Browsy, being rigorous there, has a point. A true sophist actually knows what they're doing. They follow a tradition of thought that is basically trivialism. It basically posits that fallacies are not only okay, but they're advocated for. God's will, $20. Thank you so much. Just because science cannot prove or disprove God's existence, it does not mean God doesn't exist. That's true. Proving non-existence is logically a fallacy. The burden of proof, a lies demonstrating the existence from life from non-life. Yeah, they'd have to prove that. They're fundamentally different paradigms. Like, not all truth claims are pursued the same way. The old Bonson crackers in the pantry fallacy that the empiricist must commit, that all truths must be empirically verified. That is itself a claim that isn't empirically verified. When you get, and it's fun to catch these people. It's a little bit of a cheap trick, but it works every time. You ask them simply, do you believe that all truths should be verified empirically? And they say yes. And you go, is that true? And they go, yeah. And you go, was that truth about empirically verified truths? Empirically verified. And they, oh, you're playing word games. No, I'm not. Sorry, Jimbob. I tried a super chat, didn't go through. That's okay, Adrian. But I would like to be now irrelevant. Here's some taxes for the greatest nation ever. It is the greatest, the smallest and greatest nation there is.
Right. So there's subspecies.
What I'm trying to get across to you,
the dingoes.
What I'm trying to get across to you, Kevin,
coyotes
is that
they're all subspecies.
What I'm trying to get across to you is that that's not how the actual definition of species works, because
that's arbitrary. It doesn't work. What do you mean it works? Arbitrary definitions can change, you dummy.
Because there is no set solid definition of species. What's really important to remember is that we can't go through and try to breed together every single possible combination of every single species to see which ones can produce fertile offspring. It just doesn't work.
So you have an unfalsifiable position.
And so these species lines are necessarily a lot of times.
By the way, that's not even the case. To determine whether something is a species, the question isn't whether or not you can exhaust everything that's a species. The question, he sidestepped there a little bit. The question isn't whether or not you could exhaust every listed thing that's called a species by the definition they can reproduce in isolation. The question is whether or not you can isolate any of the two similar things and they reproduce and call that a species. Forrest doesn't understand that it doesn't matter if you can access all reproductive capable animals or not. The reality is that under evolution, that has to change anyway. That's the problem with evolution. That there has to be a group of things you call itself a kind, a species, a population, and they have to be able to reproduce. But evolution also holds that they eventually reproduce something that's not quite it. And then that new thing can't reproduce with the previous thing. But the problem with this is that population has to reproduce so many of those things accidentally, where they're incapable of reproducing with the previous, but they're capable of reproducing with each other. And it's all completely random, too. That's the other part.
Arbitrary. And because we have institutions like the ICZN where we can go in and say, hey, look, we now have evidence that this is a subspecies, not a species or whatever like that, those lines do get redrawn from time to time. For example, there was a big argument for the past couple of decades over whether Neanderthals were a subspecies of Homo sapiens or a completely different species of Homo.
And you can't ever know that because you're assuming the thing you're trying to prove.
And now it's pretty clear that there's different species, right? And so, like, we had this category that was based on the evidence that we had, because we can't go back and see if they can reproduce. And then suddenly we had to make them a different species.
So bad.
But here's the misery of it. We have clear evidence that we interbred with Neanderthals and produced fertile offspring. So that's another example of species hybridizing and producing fertile offspring.
You get the definition wrong and then say it's proof for evolution. This is my exact point. They must be subspecies if, according to the concept you call, they are interbreedable. You understand my point?
So,
yeah, they must be subspecies. You actually have to now you need a new arbitrary definition called subspecies. Hilarious.
I understand what you're trying to say. I really do. But what I'm trying to get across to you is that just simply isn't how the definition of species works.
Also, what about species that reproduce with themselves? You know what I mean? What is this offspring stuff? They make their own offspring. They are everything's internal. They make their own.
However,
they don't need to reproduce with another kind, right? What's that? What is that?
I think that if we focus...
Are we just destroying all of taxonomy? They are. That's exactly it, dude. That's exactly what it is. This is one of my favorite angles of attack for evolution proponents because they're not prepared for it because nobody thinks about this stuff, apparently. You know what I mean? Like, there are some people who have figured this out, this nominal problem with evolution. But it's philosophy nerds. It's never... The biologists, like the James Tour, they don't quite grasp the fatality that's available to evolution through just this method of just cross-examining their distinctions. They don't have any. It's flux. There's nothing they can point to. It's crazy. It's actually insanity.
Focus on this too much. We're just going to get into a really semantic, focus on this. I'm going to go pull out several different introductory biology textbooks around me, demonstrate over and over that that's just one concept of species. You're going to continue to reject it. We're going to get nowhere. We can come back to this if you want.
What a pussy, dude. All the caller's doing is asking if you're making objective claims about the realness of evolution, which requires the distinction species. How can you argue for the objectivity of the thing that's changing called species if you don't have a standard for what a species is? That's fair. And he's like, I feel like we're going to get circed if you don't accept my arbitrary definition. Sure, he can move on as soon as you say everything you think you know about evolution in its actuality is based on conceptual non-actualities.
I'd rather focus on your argument here for evolution, saying that evolution can't be observed because the species lines are arbitrary. I
have to homeschool, you'll be back. You're still homeschooling, Marilyn? I thought people finished that pretty early. You seem like you're in your at least almost 30 or above 30. I don't know why you're still homeschooling.
Also doesn't make sense.
Can I just make one point? It's all interconnected. Let me just make one statement here. And you tell me if there's anything in this statement that you think is incorrect.
Sure.
There is no example of any individual from any species that has sexual reproduction where a chromosomal mutation produces a fertile male offspring.
That's interesting. Is there any example of an individual inside of a species that has a chromosomal mutation that produces a fertile offspring?
I don't think that is true.
That's not an answer, Forrest, you douchebag.
Okay.
I don't think that's true.
I've done research,
you say
and I think it's completely true. And
you say chromosomal.
You can't prove evolution.
Yeah, because these things you're calling deviations end up producing problems, right? They're problematic. They're missing the mark. They're points of instances in biology and reproduction and forming inside the womb or whatever the animal is, where it's malfunctioning. Now, evolution is so funny because their entire script, their entire narrative is based on what is observably mostly error. We would call it a miss. We would call it a miss. We'd go, oh, it missed. That's unfortunate. The ear didn't come through. Oh, man, internal organs all mangled. That sucks. Someone was born without limbs. And they're like, yeah, see? That's evolution. Therefore, those could produce really awesome things like a brain over time. What? So the brain is a malfunction, is a product of malfunction? Yes or no? Is a brain the product of accidental random mutation?
Just to be clear, you say chromosomal mutation, right?
Correct.
Not gene mutation?
No, not gene mutation. I'm talking about chromosomal mutation. Because a big part of understanding what the species is if there's reproductive isolations, and a huge part with reproductive isolations is having a different chromosome, because that makes things way more almost impossible. Every time it makes it impossible.
When you say different,
Forrest is getting wrecked here.
Chromosome. I need to understand what you're trying to say there, because any gene mutation is necessarily going to change the chromosome. Chromosomes are made of genes, right? And so, are you saying that there is now a different? Okay, so you're saying a different number of chromosomes?
Yes, a different chromosome count.
Okay, then yes, I know that's not true. I can think of one example off the top of my head of a case study in humans, actually, where a guy had an extra chromosome and a unique place because of a Robertsonian translocation, had a different chromosome count. It wasn't a major. He was able to reproduce. He was as far as I know, he wasn't infertile.
As far as you know, so what do you know? What are you talking about?
But
as far as I know, there is a time where someone did that, but I don't actually know the answer. But I could think of an example off the top of my head that I don't know. These people are snakes. They're actual snakes. I can think right now totally of a counterexample that I actually don't know the thing that needs to be the case to be a counterexample. You're such a sneak, dude.
But it was just
fucking sneak, man. Look at him. He knows it too. Oh, I don't know it, but I'm going to look stupid right now for my audience, but I'm going to just save face by inventing an example where I actually don't know whether the person could reproduce or not. Fucking guy, man. You know what I mean? Just, yeah.
This weird issue that happened because of what we would call there's a name for it. Hold on a second. Haploid repair, I think it is. No, it wasn't a chimera situation.
Okay.
It was that a female somewhere in his lineage had a Robertsonian translocation, and it wasn't noticed until it got randomly. They had eventually there was a male great grandchild or whatever like that. And he noticed he had some issues. He had some abnormalities, some sort of clinical presentations of different whatevers. And they looked and they're like, oh shit, you have this extra chromosome. And apparently it's been going on in your family for some time. And so, yeah, he had some issues. He wasn't, he had some health problems because of this.
So wait a second. Are they saying if a couple of Down syndrome people can't reproduce, they're a new species definitionally? Is that why they skirt away from species as an objective thing? Because they know within humans, if there was a case where someone couldn't reproduce with their own kind, if that was the definition, you'd actually have to call them a different species altogether. And then what's the entailment of that ethically? Like, what's the entailment of that on their oh so venerated system of human rights?
But as far as I know, he wasn't infertile because of it.
Now,
so
here's the point.
That's monosomy, not fucking haploid. Monosomy repair. That's the word I was looking for. Duh. fucking
Okay, Blippy.
Jesus.
Want to calm down, Blippy.
And so if that person were to then reproduce, then you would potentially have an issue where you could have trisomy repair, trisomy recovery in that offspring. It wouldn't necessarily render them reproductively isolated. What you're talking about there is what's called a prezygotic barrier, and it simply isn't as simple as you're making it.
Simple example, you've got the ligers, right? So if you've got a liger has the male is the lion and the female is the tiger, and that makes a liger with 38 chromosomes.
What is Corn Salt saying? Dude, if you want to debate me one-on-one, you're awfully loud in the chat. Look, I debate, more than willing to debate anyone who affirms evolution, who wants to defend it. Anybody. It may not lead to the conclusion, but it supports it, just like all the other evidence that's been found. Predictions? What predictions? You've said nothing, dude. You're talking cryptically. Notice how you forgot to mention the actual predictions? You forgot about that part. That's key to your statement, right? Corn Salt? Corn Pop? By the way, if you don't have an objective term, definition, standard for species, when you say evolution through allele frequency over time produces speciation, the term speciation is meaningless if you don't have an objective term from one species to the other. Do you understand the problem, Corn Salt?
If you can never have a fertile male, you never have a sustaining new population of hybrids.
So that's the conclusion, even if I accept your premise, because I'm pretty sure when we talk about hybridization with Neanderthals, that is something that we see, if I remember correctly, that if the mom is a Neanderthal but the dad is a Homo sapiens, then you can reproduce, but if it's the other way around, you can't. Like, there are, sex lines like that.
Sex lines like that, which lead to, well, I mean, what's the problem with having sex with a gorilla or whatever you think our ancestor is? I don't understand what the argument would be there.
That do exist. However, at the end of the day, if you can't, let's say I accept your premise here, which again, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think what you're saying is true, but let's say I accept what you're saying, right? That you can only have fertile female offspring. Okay, those fertile female offspring still carry a completely different either chromosomal configuration or at the very least a completely different genotype from their individual parent populations, and therefore you are still going to have evolution occur. It's also really important, like this is what I was talking about a minute ago when I said I'd like to go back to what you're talking about evolution specifically.
What did he say?
If you can't, let's say I accept your premise here, which again, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think what you're saying is true, but let's say I accept what you're saying, right? That you can only have fertile female offspring. Okay, those fertile female offspring still carry a completely different either chromosomal configuration or at the very least a completely different genotype.
That they can't reproduce, dude. He's like, well, what if it's only the females? Then what's the problem, dude? What do they have sex with them? What do they go to the shop and get a fake rubber thing? What are you talking about?
From their individual parent populations, and therefore you are still going to have evolution occur.
What? Did you just hear what this dipshit just said? Well, if you have a change where only the female offspring is fertile, you still have evolution occurring? No. What are you talking about? Yeah, to death? We call that death. Oh yeah. If you have a chromosomal problem and it produces offspring where only the female are fertile but the male are infertile and they can't reproduce with the female, you still have evolution. No, you have death. You have death. That's the end of the line, bro.
It's also really important. Like, this is what I was talking about a minute ago when I said I'd like to go back.
I want to scalp him.
Back to what you're talking about evolution specifically, because I think there might be a fundamental disconnect in what evolution is. It sounds like you're using the word evolution. It sounds like you're using the word evolution to be synonymous with the word speciation.
Oh gosh, really? So let me get this straight. You now also don't have a rigid definition of evolution now? This is where it gets crazy. How do you argue for evolution in all of the claims that you make about evolution? How do you argue that if it doesn't entail and require speciation? He's like, well, you're assuming that evolution, when we talk about evolution, we're talking about speciation, this concept that a Pakicetus was a Pakicetus, and then it went away from a Pakicetus through random mutation and dipped its foot in the water, and then it dipped its bigger foot in the water, and then it dipped its nose in the water, and over millions of cajillion years, in fact, only 15 million years, according to our standard, it turned into a whale. But no, speciation, no. What's speciation if species can't be defined, Forrest?
Yeah, I mean, you would have it be more easy, but if you really want to prove evolution, you'd have to have speciation.
That's right.
No, you wouldn't.
Oh, really? No, you wouldn't. It's the slipperiness of these people. I swear. They're made of a different creature, I swear. They almost prove evolution in a sense.
Point. You want a fact of evolution. If you want to have it be a fact, you would actually have to see species change, not just a little change in hair color or eye color or something like that.
That's not true at all. And it's because, so I am now very confident that you are not familiar with the actual definition of evolution or the actual long-term evidence that we have of it. Because it sounds like you are drawing this really discrete box around one specific hypothetical event that you're wanting to see.
No. Are you admitting that speciation is a hypothetical? Fine. Granted.
As like this category, and it's just not true or reasonable.
What? You didn't refute it. You just said nuh-uh, dude. Drip nose. Hey, Drip nose. You look like a trans Keebler elf.
So can you just tell me like quickly what
you look like? Not that there are a lot of cereals I'd buy, but if I saw you on a box, I'd run.
What do you think the definition of evolution is? Just give me the
Is it arbitrary? I would ask that. Is it arbitrary?
Textbook definition of evolution.
The origin of species.
No, fail. Don't do that, man. Come on. No.
No.
I mean, it technically is correct because any species has to have evolution as its origin. But when you say origin of species, it makes it sound like you're talking about abiogenesis, and it just muddies the water unnecessarily.
Incorrect. That is speciation. So it's exactly what I was saying earlier. You were conflating the words evolution and speciation.
Evolution as the origin of species.
He named his book The Origin of Species.
Yeah, so when you see a species, which is arbitrary under your view, dummy, if you look out and see a species that's arbitrary, of giraffes, arbitrary, aren't you arguing that evolution is the process by which giraffes came into the current state of being that they are? Yes or no? I could never get an Evo proponent to answer this directly. Maybe Grok will answer these questions directly.
And his
You know what? I'm possibly running toward a new movement where I only debate AI, because AI is the best situation to reflect the atheist view, including the view that they're determined mechanisms. It's not even bad faith, because according to atheists, their view does reduce to they have no will in the matter. Their answers have no will in the matter. They are coded, they're coded. They're not coded by humans. They're just coded by nature, programmed by nature to respond exactly how they're going to respond. They have no will in the matter. So I almost feel like it's better for me to debate AI to demonstrate the failures of atheism and their worldview.
His topic of the book was called what, evolution or not?
Yeah, it was on the origin of species by means of natural selection.
Yeah.
So it was about evolution. That
you just contradict yourself.
Was the title of the book. But
look at him look to the left and right like a demon.
That was also...
He doesn't know what to do.
200 years ago, and we've learned a lot of shit since then. Oh. And you'll be surprised to know that no biologists worship Darwin. He was
That's not what he said, dude. We're talking about defining evolution. Is evolution the changes in allele frequency over time that assumes to be the cause of what you call species, this arbitrary distinction that you need and reject at the same time?
just a guy who came up with the original. He had a seminal text on the theory, and he got a lot of shit right, and he got a lot of shit wrong, and we've moved on. It's like saying that, you know,
Freak.
I know the
Freak.
planets, you know, orbit in
I need a freak thing that comes in every time I say freak.
perfect circles because that's what Copernicus wrote, and he's the guy who came up with the
Oh, gosh. Are you kidding me, dude? You're talking about cosmology?
heliocentric model. And it's like, no, he came up with that idea, and he got some other shit wrong, and then we move on, right? And we learned a lot since then, and now we know it's new stuff. So that's not the definition of what evolution is.
Cool. What is it?
And the title of Darwin's book has nothing to do with it.
Okay, what's the definition then?
Okay, can I give you an example about the doors?
I would rather like settle on the definition of evolution. I can give it to you, and then we can go from there. Because if you're just going to give me an example of hybrid animals, it's not going to get us anywhere.
Well, I think that it has to do a lot with the topic of your show today is evolution a fact? And
yes,
and I think that in order to make it a fact, if we could actually see species change.
I would have pressed him on whether or not evolution is a scientific theory. And if he says yes to that first, you go, is evolution a fact? And then he's in trouble.
They become reproductively isolated, then that would make it a fact. Otherwise, I don't see it as a fact. So I'm telling you from my perspective what I would think would be a fact of evolution.
Okay, but I don't care about your perspective of what you think would be a fact. I would rather focus on the actual definition and then like demonstrate that actual definition is a thing and show how it totally lines up with your objection, rather than just saying, well, here's this weird hybrid that doesn't do XYZ thing. That doesn't really get us anywhere.
How can a statement, a definition that's ultimately arbitrary be a fact?
Okay.
So the definition, the actual definition of evolution is any change in the heritable characteristics of a population over the course of multiple generations. That's the definition of evolution. And so there's a couple things to notice here. Number one, the word species isn't in there. It's about populations, not about species. Species don't evolve. Populations evolve. The second thing is that we're talking about any change in the combined heritable characteristics of that population. So usually we're talking about
Listen
DNA.
to what he said. Listen to what he said.
Population would be a fact. I would
Listen to
we could
this.
actually see species change where they become reproductively isolated, then that would make it a fact. Otherwise, I don't see it as a fact. So I'm telling you from my perspective what I would think would be a fact of evolution.
This is so crazy.
Okay, but I don't care about your perspective of what you think would be a fact. I would rather focus on the actual definition and then like demonstrate that actual definition is a thing and show how it totally lines up with your objection, rather than just saying, well, here's this weird hybrid that doesn't do XYZ thing. That doesn't really get.
Exactly, Rich. Population. Watch this. Watch. Yeah, exactly. You guys already got it, Mr. Simpage. This is the part I was listening for, that I heard him say, and I was like, good. Oh my Lord, have mercy. Kevin has been mostly on point, but he just threw a softball to Kevin, and Kevin didn't hit a home run. Kevin, if you're listening to this, I hope you get around to this somehow. This is where you want to get the evolution proponent, which I go straight for the jugular when I debate these people. He assumes populations. Listen.
Get us anywhere.
Okay.
Listen.
So the definition, the actual definition of evolution is any change in the heritable characteristics of a population.
Population. Interesting.
Over the course of multiple generations. That's the definition of evolution. And
arbitrary, because population is referring to species, right?
So there's a couple things to notice here. Number one, the word species isn't in there.
What's a population, you mother?
I just get so mad. I just get so mad. I just get so mad.
The word species is not in. What's a population? What's the population? What is that? What is that thing? What is the population? Fucking idiot. That's why I hate these people. I hate them. I hate them.
It's about populations, not about species.
It's about population, not about species. No wonder this guy doesn't debate. I would eat this guy alive. I would be a cannibal. I would metaphorically peel his face off, put it in the air fryer with salt and maybe some truffle oil, and eat his face like a bag of homemade potato chips.
Species don't evolve. Populations evolve.
Species don't evolve. Populations evolve. Meaningless gibberish. I'm just talking out of my ass. I'm just dripping out of my nose. My drippy nose. Species don't evolve. Populations evolve. What? What are you referring to? What are you referring to?
The second thing is that we're talking about any change in the combined heritable characteristics of that population.
All the guy has to say now is ask, what's the distinction between a population and the species? And is the distinction, is it arbitrary? Is a definition of a population arbitrary? Huh, potato chip face? Getting hungry.
So usually we're talking about DNA there. It could be other things, but mainly, more often than not, we're talking about DNA. And so if we're talking about, like, you know, anything that causes...
Oh, gosh. In biology, a population is a group of individuals of the same species. You mother... Hey, Forrest, you dumb shithead. In biology, a population is a group of individuals of the same species. I need more.
A change in the DNA of a certain individual, and then over the course of several generations, the combined total genome of this population is starting to change in favor of that individual change in that one individual.
In favor of an individual? The whole population changes in favor of an individual? What?
Where you see the...
You fucking moron, dude.
What we would call the allele frequency. That
we would see allele frequency if I do things with my hands and I talk really confidently and I try to sell people that I'm not in a complete pickle right now. These people, man, they are I mean, these are the people running our government. This is the mindset of the people, like, legislating. This is the mindset of your teachers.
That one new allele becoming more frequent among the population, that would be an example of evolution. And that can lead to speciation.
Speciation can't happen if your definition of species is arbitrary. You don't know what speciation is if the definition of species is nebulous, dude. You stupid Lego collector.
But it doesn't have to.
No offense to people in the chat. Well, actually, you should be offended.
And specifically what you're talking about here in terms of populations becoming reproductively isolated, that's just called allopatric speciation.
Oh, goodness. Lord have mercy. I'm getting so hungry. Oh, you mean allopatric arbitrary process that's happening? That you don't know is happening because the term species is something you deny the existence of?
That's not a new concept at all, and it is something that we have a tremendous amount of evidence for and can even see in real time as well.
So you're saying speciation has been observed?
Yeah, largely. So, like, the
speciation has been observed. Dude, Kevin is doing a great job, by the way. You know, I would be actually maybe spurging by now. I'd be yelling at him by now. So good on Kevin. I'll learn from Kevin. Control my anger. Just control it.
I just get so mad. I just get so mad. I just get so mad.
It's hard, though. It's hard. Because he's in a constant contradiction. He keeps affirming the thing he's denying the existence of.
The key to remember is we have seen... I'm trying to think of a few examples that are really like the most useful, because I don't want to go on a tangent with you. But like, say, for example, there was a one study, I think it was the early 2000s. And
well, let me guess. It was a salamander or a thing, and they took the salamander and put it on a new island without bugs, and it went blah, 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 right? It's a new species. It developed a new stomach, they say, or whatever. Unbelievable.
I'm going to blow the names of these islands. I'm not even going to say them. There are 2 islands off the coast of Croatia.
Bjorn says, to be honest, Jimbob, Alex Malpass kind of schooled you in his recent review. No, he didn't. I already checked it out, Bjorn. I mean, that's not even close to true. Everyone was here for it. I did a live review of his review, Bjorn. You're a liar. Tell me one thing he actually said. He didn't engage with my syllogism at all. He called things weird. That's all he did. Now, I know he's just rage baiting me, Bjorn is, because he knows. He knows what gets me. But that's a pretty funny joke, Bjorn. I've got to give it to you.
Pod something and pod something else, right? We're just going to say Island 1 and Island 2, because I don't remember how to say the damn words, and I'll speak whatever they speak in Croatia. They had this population of lizards on this one island. This island also had a...
Malpass said nothing but say things were weird, strange, and then he did psychological analysis on me. He didn't engage with anything. I asked the question over and over again, what's the status of abstracta from a naturalistic view? He simply said, well, take a Platonic view of the abstract objects. I know what you're referring to them as, Malpass. I'm asking you, what's the status of them? How do they exist under naturalism? He didn't answer this question.
A lot of bugs. And so these lizards look like any old insectivorous animals. Like, they look exactly as you'd expect. And some scientists took a population, a group.
He made a good point about pulling the worldview comparisons out of a hat. No, that's not a point. How is that a point to you? How is that logical? That's using an analogy. That's not an argument. I'm not pulling a worldview out of a hat. I could defend the necessity of my worldview. And I could argue against naturalism because it's incoherent. It can't actually account for knowledge. So what are you talking about pulling a worldview comparison out of a hat? It's not pulled out of a hat. I explicitly said, Bjorn, a worldview, if you're doing a comparative analysis of a worldview, you're going to look at least typically 3 pillars, which I listed, which he scoffed at. I said, to have a worldview, you have an assumption of epistemology, which naturalism can't justify. Metaphysics, certainly they can't justify. And what's normally would be ethics or morality. But for the sake of that debate, I wanted to go into teleology to get into purpose. He scoffed at that as well. He didn't make any point, Bjorn. You're a retard. I feel bad for you if you think Alex Malpass at any point in time made any good points.
Of those lizards off this one island, put them on another island that had no lizards and no big bug population, right? Came back 40 years later and went to island number 2 and checked these lizards, and they found that they had developed really wide jaws and really thick chewing muscles and were getting better teeth and had a totally new cecum, like new guts that they had developed.
New guts they developed.
All because they were having to eat leaves.
So wait a second. They were able to eat leaves from an undeveloped stomach, and they developed a stomach that enabled them to eat the things that they were eating before the developed stomach. This is how retarded evolution is. And then it developed a thing that it needed because it was eating a thing. Well, was it eating the thing and able to eat the thing before it developed the thing? Yeah. So what are you saying? And they make fun of us when we say, they go, you think evolution's like Pokemon, right? Well, you know, rhetorically, yeah, it's kind of funny. but you're saying that right now. By the way, Forrest, is it still a lizard? Was it random or was it influenced by the leaves? Which is it? You can't... What did I tell you guys? Every time the evolution proponent debates, they hold two positions about this at the same time. One is the environment triggers the manifestation of the thing that it needs. And the other view is that random mutation triggers this thing that has no need. It's just an accidental occurrence. This is the problem. This is the distinction that's necessary in a debate between epigenetics and what they call evolution by random mutation, natural selection. Epigenetics would assume that there are small changes already embedded in the coding structure of the animal to do things in response to the environment. That would mean there's a purpose that's already there. That's what I would hold to. I would hold to, if you move an animal from one place to another, that it'll survive if it has already in it embedded the reaction to stimuli, to do things, to even like alter itself a little bit, right? It never fully becomes a new universal category, but it can alter itself. So this is different than the claim of random mutation producing traits that are compatible with the environment. There's no justification from an evolution perspective to say this. They use both arguments whenever they want. They switch, they code switch, as the kids call it.
They were becoming more and more herbivorous. There were still enough bugs for them to survive, but they were having to eat a lot more leaves. And so their bodies were adapting to herbivory. They were getting wider heads.
See, adapting. See how he just switches all of this? Adaptation assumes that there's some sort of dedicated, targeted process to adapt to a thing outside of the process itself. Do you see what these people do? Are you starting to see what they do? Random mutation would assume otherwise, Forrest. It would be an accidental production of a trait that happened to be great for the environment. Totally or accidental. A luck crapshoot. He's like, no, they adapted because the external environment, because the lack of bugs and the increase of leaves that they needed to eat, the body needed to adapt. Well, that's not the same claim as a stomach being produced not by the provocation of the external stimuli, but merely through an internal thing that happened as an accident called a random mutation. They like to switch this because it confuses the person who's talking, right?
Heads and wider jaws and totally new intestines and cecums and shit in order to digest the...
In order to, you see what I'm saying? This is why I love debating these freaks. Because they say in order to. And then they say in the same breath, not in order to. In order to. That's like saying we developed a brain in order to think. How did you develop a brain in order to think if you had no concept of the need to think? You moron. I can't wait to clip all of this. If you're an evolution proponent, we got your number. You can't say simultaneously that new stomachs and brains and all of these appendages develop over time through random mutation, accidentally spawning functionality that happens to be advantageous in the environment. Versus, you can't say that and also say animals develop new things in order to. You sophist retard.
The leaves that they were eating, and genetic analysis showed that they were in fact the direct descendants of these other lizards from island number 1.
Good. That means island number 1, you could transfer them all to this island, and guess what? They would also adapt the same capabilities. Big deal. What's your point?
Now, I don't know.
Aaron, please don't do that, Aaron. That's just bad etiquette, dude. You're banned. Don't announce someone else is doing something. What the hell's wrong with you? Hey, guys, that's like going to a restaurant and announcing there's another restaurant opening. Learn some etiquette.
Know for sure if it was ever tested, if they could interbreed with them.
Fucking asshole.
But the key here is that if those same changes had gone on long enough, absolutely that would have been the case. If those same changes that we saw over those just 40 years had continued, you would have had so much genetic variation there. You don't even need a different number of chromosomes. You would have had a prezygotic barrier where you would not have been able to blend this genome with the genome from the original island.
See, look, he's literally conflating. Whenever he wants to, he gets to argue epigenetics, and then he gets to argue a genome change. Which is it, Forrest? Which is it, dude? Which is it?
That's called allopatric speciation.
Who cares what it's called? You don't have a definition of species, dude. It's arbitrary. So saying allopatric speciation is meaningless because speciation itself, species, is arbitrary. It's not an objective thing. So all the caller has to say is, so is it objectively happening, allopatric speciation, or is it just arbitrary? It's like not real, right?
So this is just one example off the top of my head of the kind of thing that I'm talking about here, where yes, we have actually done experiments in the field showing, you know, these animals actually changing over time, showing the species develop and adapt to a new environment.
The species? You mean the population, or what? What is it? Which one is it?
Showing how natural selection works,
so insane.
And eventually that would lead to speciation. Does that make sense?
It's so insane. No, it doesn't make sense.
Yes, but according to the concept of evolution, if it hasn't been tested that they are reproductively isolated, then you're just speculating upon if speciation can actually happen, correct?
No, because that is the thing that causes speciation, is just like when you have a big enough genetic difference. But it didn't make it all the way to the idea of the concept. It missed the mark of the concept, correct? So I just want to be clear about it. What I just described is the definition of evolution.
The definition happens. Do definitions happen, Forrest? Can you point to the world and see a definition happening? He's like, no, the definition is this. What's actually happening is not actually happening.
It's the definition of the word. And also in terms of speciation, I don't know for sure if they ever did go back and check if they were reproductive.
Yes, yes. He is affirming the consequent. Now, this is really key, Amatium, is that in science, proper science, you guys, proper science, you actually do affirm the consequent. And the reason you can affirm the consequent, why it's allowed, why is affirming the consequent in its preliminary stage of doing the scientific method, why is it allowed? Well, it's allowed because of experiment. Whereas affirming the consequent in logic, typically, you're not really doing an experiment. You're not talking about causality. You're talking about whether something's the case. For instance, when it rains, it's wet outside. It's wet outside, therefore it rained. That's affirming. That's fallacious. But in science, it's different. We don't call it fallacious because that's a hypothesis. And what you can do is a method to introduce the variable to see if the hypothesis is null or valid. And so that's why the joy of doing science and the value of science is that beautiful process we call introducing variables, testing them, repeating them, and coming to inductive conclusions about what's going on. So yeah, you can affirm the consequent. The problem is under evolution is that you have no arbitration for for determining the reality. Otherwise, you could totally affirm the consequent in science so long as you have a viable hypothesis and you could test it.
Effectively isolated, it didn't matter to me to check that sort of thing because that's not what the definition of species is. But there are a lot of things that make
definition than the concept for you, right?
No, I'm in the middle of explaining why.
Oh, he's getting all bitchy now. I would be bitchy too if I got pwned that hard for 22 straight minutes.
The major thing to remember here is that when we're talking about like the reproductive isolation, the genotype is just one part of that. There are actually several what we would call prezygotic and postzygotic barriers to reproduction that would cause that sort of thing. And
Hey, Forrest, is reproduction a phenomenon that would necessarily be produced by the process called evolution? That's what I like to ask them.
So in this case, we're getting these major DNA changes that would then produce.
That would then produce. Cool story.
I think I said pre.
We have major DNA changes. Really? You do?
But I got a barrier earlier. If I did, I misspoke. That would be then a post-zygotic barrier where you would still have these species, these different populations, may be able to breed, but their offspring wouldn't be viable and or fertile because there are too many discrepancies between the two chromosomes, or between the two genomes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's called the mistake, and you couldn't argue, well, that's evolution, because you would need the successive generations to argue what you're arguing, right? That the whole slew of population species called the giraffe, or whatever, that comes from something eventually back in time that's not a giraffe, right? That's what you're arguing? Well, he's like, well, no, I mean, this could happen. And it just happens to produce infertile offspring that can't reproduce and start the succession of the Pakicetus becoming a humpback whale.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if that was able to be observed, then you could then say you have evidence of evolution to then say it's a fact. But you don't have any evidence because it didn't check.
No. That's not what I'm saying.
I just want to clarify.
I want to clarify something.
It's just
the ability for like a branch.
Why is your mouth like a cut in a sheet? Grow some lips, you freak.
We're going to call it a species for now. To develop, and then no longer be able to reproduce with their, distant kin is not a requirement for evolution. It certainly does drive evolution, but
you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, Justin. It certainly drives it. You don't know what you're saying.
It's certainly not a requirement. For example, if there's a branch.
Wait, what did he just say? I was so mesmerized by his weird sheet cut mouth.
It's just
looks like a cardboard. Looks like the first cut in a cardboard box that you do to open up the box.
The ability for like a branch, we're going to call it a species for now.
We'll call it a species for now. The thing that we deny the objectivity of. Yeah. No. Why would we call it a species, Justin? You dumbass.
Develop, and then no longer be able to reproduce with their, distant kin is not a requirement for evolution.
It's not a requirement for evolution that there is some sort of reproductive pathway toward the next set of populations for the argument for evolution. So let me get this straight. You would argue that evolution exists if there was a single population that somehow emerged out of the ground and just didn't reproduce. They were incapable of reproducing, but there were some changes in their anatomy or their physiognomy or their genome. That's evolution. How could it not be a requirement if it drives it, dude? How do you drive a process in biological creatures, Justin, for more than one generation if it's not a requirement to reproduce, you dipshit?
It certainly does drive evolution, but it's certainly not a requirement.
You are such a retard. It drives evolution, but it's not a requirement. It's just amazing.
For example, if there's a branch that breaks off and then
it's not a requirement for the thing you're calling driving evolution, which you're describing as changes in allele frequency in successive populations through random mutation and sexual selection, right? No, it's not a requirement.
It's not. If there's a branch and they break off and then they move 4,000 miles away and they
move 4,000 miles away.
Continue to reproduce and change, whether or not they can reproduce again with their ancestors that live 4,000 miles away has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to continue to evolve as a separate species.
Well, no, dude, this is insane how dumb these people are. They're talking about categories they have no distinctions for. So he's like, evolution can still happen if this group of population, it's not required to reproduce with the previous population, okay? It's required that the next population is able to reproduce with the previous population, though. He's like taking this one instance where there's this genetic problem that produces a whole new population, by the way, at the individual level, so many times that it's a population level, right? So in other words, there's a population of 1,000 lizards, and at the same time, randomly, multiple families of lizards produce an offspring that's incapable of reproducing with the current offspring, right? The current one. So that there's this like clean line at which point the new population, the new generation can't reproduce with the ones that already existed before their birth, right? Just before their birth. But they can reproduce with the new birthed generation, right? Generation X or whatever. And he's like, evolution doesn't require this ability to reproduce with the previous kind. Fine. In that instance, but moving forward, yes, it is the case. You need that. Otherwise, who are you reproducing with? You need enough individuals in a population to reproduce. It's required.
Okay, so the mink has 30 chromosomes. The marten has 38 chromosomes. The
Gary's son says, I'm in Jimbob's Discord. I want to talk to me. I'm Hoopy Fruit. Oh, you're Hoopy Fruit? What are you talking about, evolution? Well, I don't open that up until we meet the goal, and we only have 48 minutes left, and we are short 21 chats.
We're on random examples again.
The weasel has 42, stout 44, American badger 33, honey badger 40, wolverine 42.
We're going through the entire Mustelidae family, y'all. We're listening to all the Mustelids here.
Close. Well, I'm trying to give you guys some information, right?
To be sure, there is a 2000.
He just Googled. Look, Justin's like, I want to search
9 study on the Galapagos finches that demonstrate that there were isolated species that developed between 2009 and 1981. They'd been studying these finches for a couple decades, and they did observe the thing you're asking for. They did observe that there were new species that developed that were no longer producing.
Dude, I mean, it's just so stupid. It's like the thing you keep saying developed is arbitrary. You can't say a new species developed if you don't have a definition of a species. Do you understand?